Welcome to Annette on America. This is Annette Bybee, recovering attorney, single mom to two teens and a tween, and this is the Thanksgiving episode. So you might be listening on Thanksgiving Day, or you might be listening on Sunday after, or you might be listening anytime if you've listened to my podcast. Anyway, I welcome you. I like this time of year. It's very enjoyable. And I wanted to do something a little special, a little different. I'm not going to talk politics, at least try really hard not to, because I think we all need a break from time to time, especially on these really wonderful holidays that we have this time of year. So I want to tell you a little bit about the history of Thanksgiving and read a few short stories, maybe some poetry. And then at the end, I will have some fun audio that many of you may have heard before. So stick around for that. All right, so I'm going to talk about Thanksgiving at Plymouth. In September 1620, a small ship called the Mayflower left Plymouth, England, carrying 102 passengers, an assortment of religious separatists seeking a new home where they could freely practice their faith, and other individuals lured by the promise of prosperity and land ownership in the New World. After a treacherous and uncomfortable crossing that lasted 66 days, they dropped anchor near the tip of Cape Cod, far north of their intended destination at the mouth of the Hudson River. 1 month later, the Mayflower crossed Massachusetts Bay, where the Pilgrims, as they are now commonly known, began the work of establishing a village at Plymouth. Throughout the first brutal winter, most of the colonists remained on board the ship, where they suffered from exposure, scurvy, and outbreaks of contagious disease. Only half of the Mayflower's original passengers and crew lived to see their first New England spring. In March, the remaining settlers moved ashore, where they received an astonishing visit from a member of the Abenaki tribe who greeted them in English. Several days later, he returned with another Native American, Squanto, a member of the Pawtuxet tribe, who had been kidnapped by an English sea captain and sold into slavery before escaping to London and returning to his homeland on an exploratory expedition. Squanto taught the Pilgrims, weakened by malnutrition and illness, how to cultivate corn, extract sap from maple trees, catch fish in the rivers, and avoid poisonous plants. He also helped the settlers forge an alliance from the Wampanoag, a local tribe, which endured for more than 50 years and remains one of the sole examples of harmony between European colonists and Native Americans. In November 1621, after the Pilgrims' first corn harvest proved successful, Governor William Bradford organized a celebratory feast and invited a group of the fledgling colony's Native American allies, including the Wampanoag chief Massasoit. Now remembered as Americans' first Thanksgiving, although the Pilgrims themselves may not have used the term at the time, the festival lasted for 3 days. While no record exists of the first Thanksgiving's exact menu, much of what we know about what happened at the first Thanksgiving comes from the Pilgrim chronicler Edward Winslow, who wrote, "Our harvest being gotten in, our governor sent 4 men on fowling, so we might after a special manner rejoice together. After we had gathered the fruits of our labors, they 4 in one day killed as much fowl as, with a little help beside, served the company almost a week, at which time, amongst other recreations, we exercised our arms, many of the Indians coming amongst us, and amongst the rest their greatest king Massasoit, with some 90 men, whom for 3 days we entertained and feasted, and they went out and killed 5 deer, which they brought to the plantation and bestowed on our governor, and upon the captain and others. And although it be not always so plentiful as it was this time with us, yet by the goodness of God we are so far from want that we often wish you partakers of our plenty." Historians have suggested that many of the dishes were likely prepared using traditional Native American spices and cooking methods. Because the Pilgrims had no oven and the Mayflower's sugar supply had dwindled by the fall of 1621, the meal did not feature pies, cakes, or other desserts, which have become a hallmark of contemporary celebrations. Pilgrims held their second Thanksgiving celebration in 1623 to mark the end of a long drought that had threatened the year's harvest and prompted Governor Bradford to call for a religious fast. Days of fasting and Thanksgiving on an annual or occasional basis became common practice in other New England settlements as well. During the American Revolution, the Continental Congress designated one or more days of Thanksgiving a year. And in 1789, George Washington issued the first Thanksgiving proclamation by the national government of the United States. In it, he called upon Americans to express their gratitude for the happy conclusion to the country's War of Independence and the successful ratification of the U.S. Constitution. His successors, John Adams and James Madison, also designated days of thanks during their presidencies. In 1817, New York became the first of several states to officially adopt an annual Thanksgiving holiday. Each celebrated it on a different day, however, and the American South remained largely unfamiliar with the tradition. In 1827, the noted magazine editor and prolific writer, Sarah Joseph Hale, author, among countless other things, of the nursery rhyme Mary Had a Little Lamb, launched a campaign to establish Thanksgiving as a national holiday. For 36 years, she published numerous editorials and sent scores of letters to governors, senators, presidents, and other politicians, earning her the nickname the Mother of Thanksgiving. Abraham Lincoln finally heeded her request in 1863 at the height of the Civil War in a proclamation entreating all Americans to ask God to commend to his tender care all those who have become widows, orphans, mourners, or sufferers in the lamentable civil strife, and to heal the wounds of the nation. He scheduled Thanksgiving for the final Thursday in November, and it was celebrated on that day every year until 1939, when Franklin D. Roosevelt moved the holiday up a week in an attempt to spur retail sales during the Great Depression. Roosevelt's plan, known derisively as Franksgiving, was met with passionate opposition, and in 1941, the president reluctantly signed a bill making Thanksgiving the fourth holiday in November. Thanksgiving traditions and rituals. In many American households, the Thanksgiving celebration has lost much of its original religious significance. Instead, it now centers on cooking and sharing a bountiful meal with family and friends. Turkey, a Thanksgiving staple so ubiquitous it has become all but synonymous with the holiday, may or may not have been on offer when the Pilgrims hosted the inaugural feast in 1621. Today, however, nearly 90% of Americans eat the bird, whether roasted, baked, or deep-fried on Thanksgiving, according to the National Turkey Federation. Other traditional foods include stuffing, mashed potatoes, cranberry sauce, and pumpkin pie. Volunteering is a common Thanksgiving Day activity, and communities often hold food drives and host free dinners for the less fortunate. Parades have also become an integral part of the holiday in cities and towns across the United States. Presented by Macy's department stores since 1924, New York City's Thanksgiving Day Parade is the largest and most famous, attracting some 2 to 3 million spectators along its 2.5-mile route and drawing an enormous television audience. It typically features marching bands, performers, elaborate floats conveying various celebrities, and giant balloons shaped like cartoon characters. Beginning in the mid-20th century and perhaps even earlier, the President of the United States has pardoned 1 or 2 Thanksgiving turkeys each year, sparing the birds from slaughter and sending them to a farm for retirement. A number of U.S. governors also perform the annual turkey pardoning ritual. Now for some Thanksgiving controversies. For some scholars, the jury is still out on whether the feast at Plymouth really constituted the first Thanksgiving in the United States. Indeed, historians have recorded other ceremonies of thanks among European settlers in North America that predate the Pilgrims' celebration. In 1565, for instance, the Spanish explorer Pedro Menendez de Avila invited members of the local Timucua tribe to a dinner in St. Augustine, Florida, after holding a mass to thank God for his crew's safe arrival. On December 4th, 1619, when 38 British settlers reached a site known as Berkeley 100 on the banks of Virginia's James River, they read a proclamation designating the date as a day of thanksgiving to Almighty God. Some Native Americans and many others take issue with how the Thanksgiving story is presented to the American public, and especially to school children. In their view, the traditional narrative paints a deceptively sunny portrait of relations between the Pilgrims and the Wampanoag people, masking the long and bloody history of conflict between Native Americans and European settlers that resulted in the death of tens of thousands. Since 1970, protesters have gathered on the day designated as Thanksgiving at the top of Coles Hill, which overlooks Plymouth Rock, to commemorate a national day of mourning. Similar events are held in other parts of Thanksgiving of the country. Thanksgiving's ancient origins. Although the American concept of Thanksgiving developed in the colonies of New England, its roots can be traced both to Native Americans as well as back to the other side of the Atlantic. Both the separatists who came over on the Mayflower and the Puritans who arrived soon after brought with them a tradition of providential holidays, days of fasting during difficult or pivotal moments, and days of feasting and celebration to thank God in times of plenty. As an annual celebration of the harvest and its bounty, moreover, Thanksgiving falls under a category of festivals that spans cultures, continents, and millennia. In ancient times, the Egyptians, Greeks, and Romans feasted and paid tribute to their gods after the fall harvest. Thanksgiving also bears a resemblance to the ancient Jewish harvest festival of Sukkot. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. By the way, I had a Jewish friend tell me recently that Jews do not celebrate Thanksgiving. They use a different calendar, which I thought was interesting. Anyway, finally, historians have noted that Native Americans had a rich tradition of commemorating the fall harvest with feasting and merrymaking long before Europeans set foot on American shores. And let's take a look at who attended the first Thanksgiving. Let me find that. Here we go. Who was at the first Thanksgiving? As families around the country prepare to gather with family, eat turkey, and perhaps partake in some Black Friday shopping, they might be surprised to learn how much we don't know about the origins of Thanksgiving. Nearly all of what historians have learned about one of the first Thanksgiving feasts comes from a single eyewitness report, a letter written in December 1621 by Edward Winslow, one of the 100 or so people who sailed from New England aboard the Mayflower in 1620 and founded Plymouth Colony in Massachusetts. William Bradford, Plymouth's governor in 1621, wrote briefly of the event in Of Plymouth Plantation, his history of the colony, but that was more than 20 years after the feast itself. According to this account, elements of which continue to be debated by historians, especially regarding the presence and role of Native Americans, the historic event didn't happen on the fourth Thursday in November. We already learned about that. Let's see. Basically, it was to celebrate the end of a successful harvest, says Tom Begley, the executive liaison for administration, research, and special projects at Plymouth Plantation. The 3-day celebration included feasting, games, and military exercises, and there was definitely an amount of diplomacy between the colonists and the native attendees as well. It was a feast for a young crowd. Just over 50 colonists are believed to have attended, including 22 men, 4 married women, including Edward Winslow's wife, and more than 25 children and teenagers. These were the lucky ones who had made it through a rough entry into the New World, including a harsh winter during which an epidemic of disease swept through the colony, felling nearly half the original group. Some 78% of the women who had arrived on the Mayflower had died during the first winter, a far higher percentage than for men or children. For the English, the first Thanksgiving was also celebrating the fact that they had survived their first year here in New England, Begley points out. The Plymouth colonists were likely outnumbered more than 2-1 at the event by their Native American counterparts. Winslow's account records many of the Indians amongst us and amongst the rest of their greatest king, Massasoit, with some 90 men. We don't know for sure how it came about that they were there, Begley says, of the Native Americans at the first Thanksgiving. Some Native historians have suggested that Massasoit and his men were in the area anyway, because at the end of the harvest was when they typically made their diplomatic rounds to other Native groups. Also, Massasoit commented to the Pilgrims in March of 1621 that they would be back to plant the corn on the south side of what we know as Town Brook and Plymouth. So he still recognizes that there are some planting grounds that are his people's in Plymouth. The first feast was about giving thanks. While the 1621 event may not have been called Thanksgiving, the sentiment was certainly present in that historic celebration, just as it would play a defining role in how the tradition developed over the centuries to come. Giving thanks is really an important part of both cultures, Begley says. For the English, before and after every meal, there was a prayer of thanksgiving. For something on this scale, celebrating a successful harvest, there definitely would have been moments of giving thanks to their God. For the Native Americans, at the first Thanksgiving, giving thanks was a daily part of life. We as Native people traditionally have Thanksgivings as a daily, ongoing thing, Linda Coombs, the former associate director of the Wampanoag program at the Plymouth Plantation, told the Christian Science Monitor. Every time anyone went hunting or fishing or picked a plant, they would offer a prayer or acknowledgement. All right, and I have a Thanksgiving poem I would now like to recite for your enjoyment. What Thanksgiving means. Thanksgiving means a lot of things. To different ones, I know. To some, it means a wintry day with gusty wind and snow. Some others see a sunny day, a warm and balmy time, with flowers growing in the yard and orange trees or lime. Some see a colored autumn scene, a white and frosty morn, with yellow pumpkins in the field and rusty rows of corn. To some, it's just another day, and toil the body saps. No chance to look ahead to see a holiday, perhaps. To some, it means a day to stuff with turkey, sauce, and pie. They eat so much it really hurts, then on a bed they lie. Those football games in constant stream on television screens take up the day from morn till night. At least that's how it seems. But few there are who see this day as one on which we kneel in thanks to God for countless things that should us to him seal. Our health, our wealth, our freedoms dear, our family and our friends. The joy of living in this day, the list just never ends. The Pilgrims felt it worth the time to set aside a day to think of God and thank him too in their own simple way. We too should give to him above a day from busy life, a day when we can think of him without internal strife. Just pause and ponder on the name Thanksgiving Day. It ranks as one we make a holiday, a special day for thanks. That's by Robert J. Smith. All right. So obviously, this is a great day to give thanks. Every day is a great day to give thanks, but I think it's always worthwhile to pause this time of year after Halloween and before Christmas to stop and give thanks before we celebrate the birth of our Savior. And remember that that is one of the greatest things that we are giving thanks for this time of year. Also, we have seen so much going on in our lives and in our world that are difficult and that are out of our control, that I like to stop and remember to be grateful. And I've been seeing so many wonderful posts on Facebook and other social media where people pick something to be thankful for every day. I love it. I think it's wonderful. If that's one of your traditions, I salute you. I keep a gratitude journal every day. I go in and write 5 things that I'm grateful for from that day. And sometimes it's hard to start out with, but then as I start becoming more in a grateful mood and attitude of gratitude, more things come to me. We should all be able to really count our blessings every single day without too much difficulty. But sometimes life is hard. So the more we're grateful, the more we'll find things to be grateful for. At least that's what I've found. All right, I am going to now shift gears a little bit and read to you a short story about Thanksgiving. I love these heartwarming short stories. This is Bert's Thanksgiving by J.T. Trowbridge, I don't know. Anyway, revised by Christina Harding. At noon on a dreary November day, a lonesome little fellow stood at the door of a cheap restaurant in Boston and offered a solitary copy of a morning paper for sale to the people passing. But there were really not many people passing, for it was Thanksgiving Day, and the shops were closed, and everybody who had a home to go to and a dinner to eat seemed to have gone home. An old man with a face that looked pinched and who was dressed in a seedy black coat stopped at the same doorway, and with one hand on the latch, he appeared to hesitate between hunger and a sense of poverty before going in. It was possible, however, that he was considering whether he could afford himself the indulgence of a morning paper, seeing it was Thanksgiving Day. So at least Bert thought, and addressed him accordingly. "Buy a paper, sir? All about the fire in East Boston and arrest of burglars in Springfield. Only 2 cents. The little old man looked at the boy with keen gray eyes, which seemed to light up the pinched look of his face, and answered in a shrill voice, "You ought to come down in your price this time of day. You can't expect to sell a morning paper at 12 o'clock for full price." "Well, give me a cent then," said Bert. "That's less than cost, but never mind. I'm bound to sell out anyway." "You look cold," said the old man. "Cold," replied Bert. "I'm nearly froze, and I want my dinner. And I'm going to have a big dinner, too, seeing it's Thanksgiving Day." "Ah, lucky for you, my boy," said the old man. "You've a home to go to, and friends, too, I hope." "No, sir, no home and no friend, only my mother." "It's more lonesome not to eat at all," said the old man, his gray eyes twinkling. "Here, I guess I can find 1 cent for you, though there's nothing in the paper, I know." The old man spoke with some feeling. His fingers trembled, and somehow he dropped 2 cents instead of 1 into Bert's hand. "Here, you've made a mistake," cried Bert. "A bargain's a bargain. You've given me a cent too much." "No, I didn't. I never give anybody a cent too much. But see here," and Bert showed the 2 cents, offering to return 1. "No matter," said the old man. "It will be so much less for my dinner, that's all." Bert had instinctively pocketed the pennies, but he felt bad. "Poor old man," he thought. "He's seen better days, I guess. Perhaps he's no home. A boy like me can stand it, but I guess it must be hard for him. He meant to give me 2 cents the whole time, and I don't believe he has a decent dinner. He has had a decent dinner for many a day. Look here," he cried. "Where are you going to get your dinner today?" "I can get a bite here as well as anywhere. It don't matter much to me," replied the old man. "I'll pay for your dinner," Bert exclaimed. "Come, we don't have a Thanksgiving but once a year, and a fellow wants a good time then." "Ah," said the man, taking off his hat and giving it a brush with his elbow as they entered the restaurant, as if trying to appear as respectable as he could. He placed his hat on the floor and took a seat opposite Bert at a little table which they had all to themselves. Bert offered him the menu. "I must ask you to choose for me. Nothing very extravagant. You know I am used to plain food." "So am I, but I'm going to have a dinner for once in my life, and so are you," cried Bert generously. "What do you say to chicken soup? And end up with a big piece of pumpkin pie. How's that for a Thanksgiving dinner?" "Scrumptious," said the old man, appearing to glow with the warmth of the room and the prospect of a good dinner. "But won't it cost you too much?" "Too much? No, sir," said Bert. "Chicken soup, 15 cents. Pie, they give tremendous big pieces here. Thick, I tell you, 10 cents. That's 25 cents, half a dollar for 2. Of course, I don't eat this way every day of the year. Here, waiter," and Bert gave his princely order as if he did it every day. "Where is your mother? Why don't I have dinner with her?" the little man asked. Why don't you have dinner with her? That would have been an interesting tale. Anyway, "Why don't you have dinner with her?" the little man asked. Bert's face grew sober in a moment. That's the question. Why don't I? I'll tell you why I don't. I've got the best mother in the world. What I want more than anything is to be with my mother and my two sisters again, and I am not ashamed to say so. Bert's eyes grew very tender, and he went on, while his companion across the table watched him with a very gentle, searching look. I haven't been with her now for 2 years, hardly at all since Father died. Mom couldn't support my sisters, and so I said, I'm a boy. I can do something to help. I'll go to work and maybe help you a little, besides taking care of myself. What could you do? Said the little old man. That's it. I was only 11 years old, and what could I do? So I started selling newspapers. I've sold newspapers ever since, and I shall be 12 years old next month. You like it? Said the old man. It's okay to help make my own living, replied Bert proudly. But what I want is to learn some trade or regular business and settle down and make a home for my mother. But there's no use talking about that. Well, I've told you about myself, added Bert. Now suppose you tell me something. About myself? Yes, I think that would go pretty well with the pie. But the man shook his head. Life isn't what we think it will be when we are young. You'll find that out soon enough. I am all alone in the world now, and I am nearly 70 years old. It must be so lonely at your age. What do you do for a living? I have a little place in Devonshire Street. My name is Mr. Crooker. You'll find me up 2 flights of stairs, back room at the right. Come and see me, and I'll tell you about my business and perhaps help you get a better job, for I know several businessmen. And Mr. Crooker wrote his address with a little stub of a pencil on a corner of the newspaper which had led to their acquaintance, tore it off carefully, and gave it to Bert. And I'm going to stop there as we go into the break. Return on the other side for the rest of the story. Welcome back to Annette on America and my Thanksgiving special. By the way, if you missed any of this episode or other episodes, you can find it on AnnetteTalks.com. And now I resume Bert's Thanksgiving. Well, Bert, said the old man, I'm glad to make your acquaintance, and I hope you'll come and see me. You'll find me in very humble quarters. Now, won't you let me pay for my dinner? I believe I have enough money. Let me see, and he put his hand in his pocket. Bert would not hear of such a thing, but walked up to the desk and paid the whole bill. When he looked around again, the little old man was gone. I'll go and see him the first chance I have, said Bert, as he looked at the penciled strip of newspaper margin again before putting it in his pocket. On the following Monday, Bert went to call on his new friend in Devonshire Street. Having climbed 2 flights, he found the door of the back room at the right ajar, and looking in, saw Mr. Crooker at a desk, in the act of receiving a roll of money from a well-dressed visitor. Bert entered unnoticed and waited till the money was counted and a receipt signed. Then, as the visitor departed, Mr. Crooker noticed the boy, offered him a chair, and then turned to place the money in the safe. So this is your place of business? Asked Bert, glancing about the plain office room. What do you do here? I buy real estate, sometimes sell, rent, and so forth. Who for? Asked Bert. For myself, said the old gentleman with a smile. Bert was shocked. This was the man whom he had invited to dinner last Thursday. I thought you were a poor man. I am a poor man, said Mr. Crooker, locking his safe. Money doesn't make a man rich. I've enough money. I own houses in the city. They give me something to think about and keep me busy. I had truer riches once, but I lost them long ago. From the way the old man's voice trembled and eyes glistened, Bert thought he must have meant by these riches the friends he had lost, wife and children perhaps. To think of me inviting you to dinner. It was odd, but it may turn out to have been a lucky circumstance for both of us. I like you. I believe in you, and I have an offer to make you. I want a trusty, bright boy in this office, somebody I can bring up in my business and leave it with as I get too old to run it myself. What do you say? What could Bert say? The lonely, childless old man who owned so many houses wanted a home and a family. One of his houses he offered to Bert's mother, with ample support for herself and children if she would allow him to live with them like a grandfather. Of course she accepted, and Bert soon saw all his dreams come true. He had employment which promised to become a profitable business, as indeed it did in a few years. The old man and the boy proved very useful to each other, and more than that, he was united once more with his mother and sisters in a happy home where he has since had many Thanksgiving dinners. Nice. All right. There's another story that I wanted to read that I thought would be entertaining, or at least heartwarming. Okay, this is called The Night Before Thanksgiving by Sarah Orne Jewett. A lot of these are old. I don't know what it is about Thanksgiving and holidays, but I really enjoy the stories from a long time ago. Maybe it's because it helps me to forget the way life is right now, and it's nice to do that for a while. Not for a long time, but to take a break from today's problems by remembering yesterday. And so I enjoy that. I enjoy reading these old stories when it comes time for the holidays. All right, The Night Before Thanksgiving, and this was published in 1905, so obviously very old. And the last one as well, since they were talking about a newspaper costing a penny. All right. There was a sad heart in the low-storied, dark little house that stood humbly by the roadside under some tall elms. Small as her house was, old Mrs. Robb found it too large for herself alone. She only needed the kitchen and a tiny bedroom that led out of it, and there still remained the best room and a bedroom with the low garret overhead. There had been a time after she was left alone when Mrs. Robb could help those who were poorer than herself. She was strong enough not only to do a woman's work inside her house, but almost a man's work outside in her piece of garden ground. At last, sickness and age had come hand in hand, those two relentless enemies of the poor, and together they had wasted her strength and substance. She had always been looked up to by her neighbors as being independent, but now she was left lame-footed and lame-handed with a debt to carry and her large bare land and the house ill-provisioned to stand the siege of time. For a while she managed to get on, but at last it began to be whispered about that there was no use for anyone so proud. It was easier for the whole town to care for her than for a few neighbors, and Mrs. Robb had better go to the poorhouse before winter and be done with it. At this terrible suggestion, her brave heart seemed to stand still. The people whom she cared for most happened to be poor, and she could no longer go into their households to make herself of use. The very elms overhead seemed to say, "Oh no," as they groaned in the late autumn winds. And there was something appealing even to the strange passer-by in the look of the little gray house, with Mrs. Robb's pale, worried face at the window. Someone had said that anniversaries are days to make other people happy in, but sometimes when they come, they seem to be full of shadows and the power of giving joy to others, that inalienable right which ought to lighten the saddest heart, the most indifferent sympathies, sometimes even this seems to be withdrawn. So poor old Mary Ann Robb sat at her window on the afternoon before Thanksgiving and felt herself poor and sorrowful indeed. Across the frozen road, she looked eastward over a great stretch of cold meadow land, browned and wind-swept and crossed by icy ditches. It seemed to her as if before this and all the troubles that she had known and carried, that there had always been some hope to hold, as if she had never looked poverty full in the face and seen its cold and pitiless look before. She looked anxiously down the road with a horrible shrinking and dread at the thought of being asked, out of pity, to join in some Thanksgiving feast. But there was nobody coming with gifts in hand. Once she had been full of love for such days, whether at home or abroad, but something chilled her very heart now. Her nearest neighbor had been foremost of those who wished her to go to the town farm, and he had said more than once it was the only sensible thing. But John Mander was waiting impatiently to get her tiny farm into his own hands. He had advanced some money upon it in her extremity, and pretended that there was still a debt. After he cleared her wood lot to pay himself back, he would plow over the graves in the field corner and fell the great elms, and waited now like a spider for his poor prey. He often reproached her for being too generous to worthless people in the past and coming to be a charge to others now. Oh, if she could only die in her own house and not suffer the pain of homelessness and dependence. It was just at sunset, and as she looked out hopelessly across the gray fields, there was a sudden gleam of light far away on the low hills beyond. The clouds opened in the west and let the sunshine through. One lovely gleam shot swift as an arrow and brightened a far, cold hillside where it fell, and at the same moment a sudden gleam of hope brightened the winter landscape of her heart. There was Johnny Harris, said Marianne Robb softly. He was a soldier's son, left an orphan and distressed. Old John Mander scolded, but I couldn't see the poor boy in want. I kept him that year after he got hurt, spite of what anybody said, and he helped me what little he could. He said I was the only mother he'd ever had. I'm going out west, Mother Robb, says he. I shan't come back till I get rich. And then he'd look at me and laugh, so pleasant and boyish. He wa'n't one that liked to write. I don't think he was doing very well when I heard. There, it's most 4 years ago now. I always thought if he got sick or anything, I should have a good home for him to come to. There's poor Ezra Blake, the deaf one, too. He won't have any place to welcome him. The light faded out of doors, and again Mrs. Robb's troubles stood before her. Yet it was not so dark as it had been in her sad heart. She still sat by the window, hoping now in spite of herself, instead of fearing, and a curious feeling of nearness and expectancy made her feel not so much light-hearted as light-headed. I feel just as if something was going to happen, she said. Poor Johnny Harris, perhaps he's thinking of me if he's alive. It was dark now out of doors, and there were tiny clicks against the window. It was beginning to snow, and the great elms creaked in the rising wind overhead. A dead limb of one of the old trees had fallen that autumn, and poor firewood as it might be, it was Mrs. Robb's own, and she had burnt it most thankfully. There were only a few small armfuls left, but at least she could have the luxury of a fire. She had a feeling that it was her last night at home, and with strange recklessness began to fill the stove as she used to do in better days. I'll get me good and warm, she said, still talking to herself, as lonely people do, and I'll go to bed early. It's coming on to storm. The snow clicked faster and faster against the window, and she sat alone thinking in the dark. There's lots of folks I love, she said once. They'd be sorry I ain't got nobody to come and no supper tonight after the night before Thanksgiving. I'm dreadful glad they don't know. And she drew a little nearer to the fire and laid her head back drowsily in the old rocking chair. It seemed only a moment before there was a loud knocking, and somebody lifted the latch of the door. The fire shone bright through the front of the stove and made a little light in the room, but Marianne Robb waked up frightened and bewildered. "Who's there?" she called as she found her crutch and went to the door. She was only conscious of her one great fear. "They've come to take me to the poorhouse," she said, and burst into tears. There was a tall man, not John Mander, who seemed to fill the doorway. "Come, let me in," he said gaily. "It's a cold night. You didn't expect me, did you, Mother Robb?" "Dear me, what is it?" she faltered, stepping back as he came in and dropping her crutch. "Be I dreamin'? I was a-dreamin' about... Oh, there! What was I a-sayin'? 'Tain't true. No, I've made some kind of mistake." Yes, and this was the man who kept the poorhouse, and she would go without complaint. They might have given her notice, but she must not fret. "Sit down, sir," she said, turning toward him with a touching patience. "You'll have to give me a little time. If I'd been notified, I wouldn't have kept you waiting a minute this stormy night." It was not the keeper of the poorhouse. The man by the door took one step forward and put his arm round her and kissed her. "What are you talking about?" said John Harris. "You ain't going to make me feel like a stranger. I've come all the way from Dakota to spend Thanksgiving. There's all sorts of things out here in the wagon, and a man to help get 'em in. Why, don't cry so, Mother Robb. I thought you'd have a great laugh if I come and surprised you. Don't you remember I always said I should come?" It was John Harris indeed. The poor soul could say nothing. She felt now as if her heart was going to break with joy. He left her in the rocking chair and came and went in his old boyish way, bringing in the store of gifts and provisions. It was better than any dream. He laughed and talked and went out to send away the man to bring a wagon full of wood from John Manders, and came in himself laden with pieces of the nearest fence to keep the fire going in the meantime. They must cook the beefsteak for supper right away. They must find the pound of tea among all the other bundles. They must get good fire started in both the cold bedrooms. Why, Mother Rob didn't seem to be ready for the company from out west. The great cheerful fellow hurried about the tiny house, and the little old woman limped after him, forgetting everything but hospitality. Had not she a house for John to come to? Were not her old chairs and tables in their places still? And he remembered everything and kissed her as they stood before the fire, as if she were a girl. He had found plenty of hard times, but luck had come at last. He had struck luck, and this was the end of a great year. No, I couldn't seem to write letters. No use to complain of the worst. And I wanted to tell you the best when I came. And he told it while she cooked the supper. No, I wa'n't going to write no foolish letters, John repeated. He was afraid he should cry himself when he found out how bad things had been. And they went down to supper together, just as they used to do when he was a homeless orphan boy whom nobody else wanted in winter weather while he was crippled and could not work. She could not be kinder now than she was then, but she looked so poor and old. He saw her taste her cup of tea and set it down again with a trembling hand and look at him. No, I wanted to come myself, he blustered, wiping his eyes and trying to laugh. And you're going to have everything you need to make you comfortable long as you live, Mother Rob. She looked at him again and nodded, but she did not even try to speak. There was a good hot supper ready, and a happy guest had come. It was the night before Thanksgiving. Isn't that sweet? I have to admit to having some funny thoughts, like when he kissed her by the fire, as if she was a girl. Like, I hope it was just a chaste peck on the cheek. All right, let's see. Let's find another story here. Why He Carried the Turkey by James Baldwin. All right. This is from 1912. Again, a nice old story. I love these old stories. Also, I have to admit that the last story made me think, take care of someone when you're younger so that when you're old, they'll come back and take care of you. I didn't used to think about that kind of thing, but now that I'm in my 50s, I'm starting to think that way a little bit, just for coming years. You know, if things take a turn for the worse and I somehow end up poor like that poor lady in the last story, I need to start being really good to my kids and then eventually someday grandkids while I can, right? So that then they'll look kindly on me. All right, here we go. Why He Carried the Turkey. In Richmond, Virginia, one Saturday morning, an old man went into the market to buy something. He was dressed plainly, his coat was worn, and his hat was dingy. On his arm he carried a small basket. I wish to get a fowl for tomorrow's dinner, he said. The market man showed him a fat turkey, plump and white and ready for roasting. Ah, that's just what I want, said the old man. My wife will be delighted with it. He asked the price and paid for it. The market man wrapped a paper round it and put it in the basket. Just then a young man stepped up. I will take one of those turkeys, he said. He was dressed in fine style and carried a small cane. Shall I wrap it up for you? Asked the market man. Yes, here is your money, answered the young gentleman, and send it to my house at once. I cannot do that, said the market man. My errand boy is sick today, and there is no one else to send. Besides, it is not our custom to deliver goods. Then how am I to get it home? Asked the young gentleman. I suppose you will have to carry it yourself, said the market man. It's not heavy. Carry it myself? Who do you think I am? Fancy me carrying a turkey along the street, said the young gentleman, and he began to grow very angry. The old man who had bought the first turkey was standing quite near. He had heard all that was said. Excuse me, sir, he said, but may I ask where you live? I live at number 39 Blank Street, answered the young gentleman, and my name is Johnson. Well, that is lucky, said the old man, smiling. I happen to be going that way, and I will carry your turkey if you will allow me. Oh, certainly, said Mr. Johnson. Here it is. You may follow me. When they reached Mr. Johnson's house, the old man politely handed him the turkey and turned to go. Here, my friend, what shall I pay you? Said the young gentleman. Oh, nothing, sir, nothing, answered the old man. It was no trouble to me, and you are welcome. He bowed and went on. Young Mr. Johnson looked after him and wondered. Then he turned and walked briskly back to the market. Who is that polite old gentleman who carried my turkey for me? He asked of the market man. That is John Marshall, Chief Justice of the United States. He is one of the greatest men in our country, was the answer. The young gentleman was surprised and ashamed. Why did he offer to carry my turkey? He asked. He wished to teach you a lesson, answered the market man. What sort of lesson? He wished to teach you that no man should feel himself too fine to carry his own packages. Oh, no, said another man who had seen and heard it all. Judge Marshall carried the turkey simply because he wished to be kind and obliging. That is his way. That's very sweet. I remember studying some of John Marshall's decisions in law school. All right. So, I just had a few thoughts before I get to my last final piece of this Thanksgiving special. A lot of the older Thanksgiving stories revolve around poverty and someone being hungry on Thanksgiving and someone else feeding that person on Thanksgiving. And today we don't really relate to that grinding poverty. We do, of course, see people who are still poor, but poor today is not poor back then, right? I mean, poor today is your screen, your big screen TV is not as big as the one that you would like to have, or your cell phone's not the latest. I mean, there obviously are some people who are poorer than that, but that's a typical poor today. But I think today we have more people that are poor in spirit. And I mean by that they are wrapped up in the world and don't really understand that they have a loving Heavenly Father and a Savior. And I think that's sad. So I think one of the ways that we can help those around us is, yes, we do want to feed the poor and the poor in other countries, because other countries are not doing so well. And next month, there will be lots and lots of ways you can go to these giving boxes that they'll have downtown Denver and other places. It's so easy to go online and find a way to help feed poor in other countries. But also, help feed the poor in spirit. Share with them your love that you take as an example from our Savior. And share with them that they have a Savior that loves them. I need to be better at doing that as well. All right, I always like to end my show on a humorous note. So some of you may remember this. I'm also going to share this because I love radio, and this is one of those shows that got me interested in radio when I was a kid. This is from the 70s. It's WKRP. If you have not seen the entire turkey episode, go see it. Otherwise, it started already. Let me try this again. This is the Cincinnati WKRP in Cincinnati turkey drop. If you haven't seen it, go find it on YouTube. It's hilarious. Oh, here you go.
All right, fellow babies, and now it's time to go to our live remote man on the scene at the Pinedale Shopping Mall for the big WKRP turkey giveaway. So, take it away, Les Nessman.
This is Les Nessman, your man on the scene here at the Pinedale Shopping Center, where the excitement is mounting. We're here to witness the big WKRP Turkey Thanksgiving giveaway.
Hey, you got permission to be out here? What? You're blocking my store here, buddy.
Don't you know who I am? I'm Les Nessman. I won the Buckeye News Hawk Award last year.
Good for you, Buckeye. Now get out of my doorway.
I'm sorry. Creep.
So far, so good, huh?
I'm here with hundreds of people who have gathered to witness what has been described as perhaps the greatest turkey event in Thanksgiving Day history. All we know for sure is that in a very few moments there are going to be a lot of happy people out here. Now the crowd is curious but well behaved. And I think I hear something now. The crowd is moving out into the parking area. And oh yes, I can see it now. It's a helicopter, and it's coming this way.
A helicopter?
It's flying something behind it. I can't quite make it out. It's a large banner, and it says, Happy Thanksgiving. sight, ladies and gentlemen, what a sight. The copter seems to be circling the parking area now. I guess it's looking for a place to land. No, something just came out of the back of the helicopter. It's a dark object. Perhaps a skydiver plummeting to the earth from only 2,000 feet in the air. Second to the third. There's no parachutes yet.
Can't be skydivers. I can't tell just yet what they are, but...
Oh, my God, they're turkeys!
Oh, Johnny, can you get this? Oh, they're crashing to the earth right in front of our eyes! One just went through the windshield of a parked car! This is terrible.
Cars running around, pushing each other? Oh, my goodness! Oh, the humanity! People are running about. The turkeys are hitting the ground like sacks of wet cement. I don't know how much longer the crowd is running for their lives. I think I'm going to step inside. I can't stay out here and watch this anymore. No, I can't go in there.
Children are searching for their mothers, and not since the Hindenburg tragedy has there been anything like this. I don't know how much longer I can hold my position here, Johnny. The crowd...
Les, are you there? Les isn't there. Thanks for that on-the-spot report, Les. If you just tuned in, the Pinedale Shopping Mall has just been bombed with live turkey. Film at 11.
But Mr. Colley, a lot of turkeys don't make it through Thanksgiving.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you very much.
Yes, goodbye. That was the Humane Society. They sounded pretty upset.
It should have worked.
Can I help you?
No, I'm fine.
Hey, Mr. Carlson. What's it like to ride in a helicopter?
A lot of fun.
Mr. Carlson, could I get you a cup of coffee?
What? No, thank you, Jennifer. We agreed?
Sir, it was the most unusual promotion idea I ever heard of.
Never been anything else like it. No, I don't suppose there has. I thought it would work. I planned this thing right down to the last detail. It was perfect. Where'd you get those birds?
Les, are you okay? I don't know. A man and his 2 children tried to kill me. After the turkeys hit the pavement, the crowd kind of scattered, but some of them tried to attack me. I had to jam myself into a phone booth. Then Mr. Carlson had the helicopter land in the middle of the parking lot. I guess he thought he could save the day by turning the rest of the turkeys loose. Gets pretty strange after that.
Yeah, right. No, Les, come on now, tell us the rest.
I really don't know how to describe it. It was like the turkeys mounted a counterattack. It was almost as if they were organized.
As God is my witness, I thought turkeys could fly.
Thank you for listening to Annette on America. Happy Thanksgiving.